before National Grief Awareness Day. So tomorrow, August 30th, in the United States, Sunday will be National Grief Awareness Day. And it is something that a group has been working on for a number of years. And if you haven't yet, there is a petition over on change.org, and they're still looking for signatures. So if you haven't done it yet, it doesn't cost anything to put your signature on there. And what that will do is let people know that you want National Grief Awareness Day to be a thing. So that is happening tomorrow. It is kind of a big deal, and it's all been grassroots and getting things put together on that realm of things. So tonight, as the culmination of a month of me talking about grief and thinking about grief and sharing all the things that have come up in my brain about how grief has impacted me as a person, what's happened on my grief journey. You can find all of those live streams wherever you are. I know that I have this going out to a couple different places. So if you happen to be watching the replay, feel free to put questions in. I do circle back and engage and conversate and whatnot. So on to the stories. Are you ready for stories? I'm ready for stories. So the title of this one has Grief Gone Wild in it. And what Grief Gone Wild was, and I don't know if it's still a thing, I really hope it is, but in 2006 in Phoenix, Hospice of the Valley had a grant, I believe. They had sponsors. Somehow they were able to have this program come together. And it was specifically designed for teenagers. And you had to be a teen, and you had to have lost you had to have some sort of significant loss. So a friend, a parent, you had to be dealing with grief from death. So that was the basis of the program, and that's who they were serving. And it was really neat in that it was something my brother and I were able to go do together. And it was a river trip on the San Juan River, which is in Utah. And it was something that funny, not funny, but if you don't know this about me, my family is massively into the outdoors. And I grew up doing whitewater river rafting trips. One of the last big family adventures that we were able to have when my father was still alive was actually whitewater rafting down the Colorado River for 21 days. And it was absolutely one of the most incredible experiences of my life. And of course, later, my father would pass away. And that summer, after he passed away, my brother and I were able to go on this Grief Gone Wild river trip. And with other teens just like us who were experiencing this grief journey that was happening. Some of them had, it was really fresh. I think the person had passed away within a couple weeks of them coming on the trip. And so for them, it was like really, really raw. For us, it had only been a couple of months since my dad had passed away. And even though my brother and I had been on this river before, and I think it might have even been our third time on that particular river, going down that river with people who had never been whitewater rafting before, and that the only things we shared in common were that we were all teenagers, and that we had experienced loss. And it was just a really neat way to find a group of people who we wouldn't have found otherwise. And I talked a little bit about this on one of the live streams, is that through this grief journey, there's community that's found. If you're willing and ready to go out and find and talk to people, you're able to find community. And if you're not ready to go do that in real life, there's an app called the Good Grief app. And it's an incredible resource that connects people who are experiencing similar grief journeys. So you're paired up based on loss type, your family situation, and your demographics. So it's a really neat way to connect with people if you're not able to get to support groups, if you're not able to if you're not ready to go out and do those things, exchanging energy with people and being in the same space with people who are feeling this intense sorrow, I understand is sometimes heartbreaking and makes things worse for you. So that's an option if you're not ready to get outside. If you are ready to get outside, if there might be a program like this in your area, and if you how do I put this? If you have a child and your child is experiencing this grief journey with you, and especially if they're a teenager, I would highly, highly encourage you to look for a program like Grief Gone Wild, something that's dedicated specifically to teenagers, because teenagers that are going through grief, it affects them in a multitude of ways, and in ways that you can't even begin to imagine. And having experienced loss as a teen and then experiencing loss as an adult, I'm sure that my teenage experience informed my adult experience. But I know that for me, it was a lot different. I had the tools to experience when I experienced it as an adult. Granted, I had already done it once before, but giving your teen the opportunity to share their experiences with other teenagers that are having the same things, that they're feeling the same things, that anger part, all the things that come along with the grief part. I really, really implore you to find something that speaks to your teenager and not forcing them to do it. You might need to push a little bit. I seem to remember my mom having to push a little bit. My situation was a little unique because I'd already had a baby. Um, and yes, I was still a teenager. And there was childcare, like we were gone for a couple of days. I think by that point I was no longer able to breastfeed, so that wasn't a thing. But I had a few more things going on. But if it fits into your life and you can make it happen, do the legwork and find it for yourself. And so the last point on this is, for me, getting outside and being outside was monumental and just so pivotal in my grief journey. I know that for me, being outside and walking and backpacking and being in the wilderness is one of the things that brings me peace, and it brings me calm. I can clear out my brain and, just remember the things I need to remember and be able to process stuff in my head. So that's something that was also a really cool way for Hospice of the Valley to get kids outside, get them talking. There was an article written in October of 2006. I'm going to put a link to it in the comments. Reading through it, I'm not sure that I don't think it was accurate. So apologies to the person who authored it. Um, one of the comments was a quote from a young woman, and she says that it was that this person was the only girl on the trip. Well, spoiler alert, I was on the trip too, and my mom did not die. So if you read the article, I believe it was still about the trip that I was on. It's actually the only thing I can find online with it. We got a really neat journal piece component out of it, and then there's a disc with pictures and whatnot. And I think there's a couple of pictures floating around on my brother's Facebook still from it. Um, but yeah, so just that whole idea of being able to get outside and and just be somewhere where there isn't anything else going on. There's no expectations, especially for your teens. There's no pressure from school. There's no pressure from all these other pieces, because when you're on the river, and there's something specific about being on the river. When you're on the river, they're really the only things that you have to worry about. The only things you have to do are like take care of the immediate things that are happening that day. And the only job you have is to get downstream. There isn't anything else. It's simple. There's no cell phones, there's no computers, there's no work. There's the chores that you're in charge of, there's the tasks you need to take care of in order to care for the group, care for the gear, care for the things that you're using on the river, and then, of course, caring for yourself. But that's it. There isn't anything else that needs to happen. And it's a really um, beyond being on the water, beyond the stillness, beyond the experience, like just only having those things to take care of is just, for me, was really, really huge. And I love being on the river. So that's what I wanted to share with you tonight. I wanted to share Grief Gone Wild with you. And it was if anyone from Hospice of the Valley ever happens to watch this, thank you for taking the time to put that program together and for making it available for teens and making it something that that we could come do. And it made a huge difference in my life. So with that, we'll leave you with that. I believe I will see you tomorrow because I want to do a live stream for National Grief Awareness Day on the actual day. But until then, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful evening and happy writing.